Edexcel AS Business Studies Unit 2A Managing People Revision Screencast. By the end of this section of the syllabus, you need to be able to understand the benefits and drawbacks of different types of organisational structure, discuss recruitment and training processes, apply motivation theories to different scenarios, discuss how managers can get the best from their staff, and discuss how businesses can reduce their labour costs. So first of all, a typical organisational structure looks like this. So we have people within the organisation organised in a hierarchy or organisation chart. So the people with the most authority and responsibility at the top, and as we move down the layers or levels in the hierarchy, there becomes diminishing responsibility and authority. We also see in this example that people are organised by department or function. So we've got the finance team, then the marketing, then the human resources department, then the production department. And that's a typical organisational structure. So, a couple of key terms that we need to know about organisation structure. First of all, span of control. The span of control is the number of employees a manager has direct responsibility for. So, even though the managing director is actually responsible for everybody within the organisation, his span of control is actually 4, and the people within his span of control are the finance director, marketing director, human resource director and production director. So his span of control is 4. Okay, the finance director's span of control is 1. He has the finance manager as his subordinate. Chain of command is about the formal channels of communication throughout the hierarchy. So the managing director will tell his directors, the directors will then tell the managers will then tell the assistants or the department or the supervisors. Okay, and so on down the hierarchy. And likewise, if we need upwards communication, we go back through the same route. So it's the formal channels of communication in the organisation chart. So a hierarchical structure refers to a business being organised in a traditional hierarchy by function, but business can also be organised by geographic region or by product. A tall structure means there are lots of layers within the hierarchy, and usually within this, managers have small spans of control, so don't manage very many people. Okay, and there are more layers in the hierarchy. It's a much more expensive structure, however it does give lots of opportunities for employees to get promotion. But as we've been in the recession and as businesses are finding it more difficult to compete, they look at trying to reduce their costs, and more are moving to a flatter structure. So they are delayering, taking layers out of the hierarchy by making people redundant and moving to a flatter structure, so there are less levels or layers in the hierarchy. And that's sometimes referred to as a horizontal structure. The other things you need to know about in this section are the difference between centralised and decentralised decision making. So if all the decisions are made in a head office and the head office tells the regional offices what to do, that's a centralised structure. If the regions themselves have an opportunity to make decisions, that's a decentralised structure. So when decisions are made away from head office, that's decentralised. Now, often it's thought that a decentralised structure will be more responsive because people in the different regions will be able to make decisions that affect the business in that region, so they can be more responsive to customers' needs in that region. However, a centralised decision-making structure is thought to be more cost-effective because we are more likely to have centralised buying, for example, and we can then negotiate greater bulk buying discounts. But it really depends on, I suppose, the overall size of the organisation, and it depends on the nature of the business, what they actually do and how responsive they need to be to customers' needs. The second thing you need to know about is recruitment. So, first of all, we might have to recruit workers who've left, so it might be retirement, it might be maternity leave, it might be people who have been dismissed. Okay, we can't replace people who've been made redundant because redundancy implies that the position no longer is available. So we wouldn't recruit for positions where people have been made redundant, because then the people we'd made redundant would have a case for constructive dismissal. So we're only talking about people who have left their job for their own reasons associated to them. So we need to get those people replaced. We might recruit to get workers with new skills. We might recruit to increase the number of workers so that we can produce more within the business. And we then have to make a decision about whether we're recruiting internally, so someone already works for the company, or if we're going to do external recruitment, so trying to bring someone in who's not already employed by the organisation. Often external recruitment is considered to be quite effective if the business could do with some new ideas, as people from outside will come in with a different kind of mindset and bring in new ideas. But internal recruitment often allows people to settle into the job more quickly because they already know the ropes, they already know how the organisation works. So whichever option, we have to follow the various stages of recruitment. So the first stage is a needs analysis, where a business will identify what exactly it is that they need to recruit. So how many workers in what position. Then for each of the vacancies we draw up a job description, which describes the tasks, the responsibilities, the purpose, the reporting lines for that particular job. A person specification identifies the features of the best candidate. So we'd be looking at the qualifications, personal qualities, skills, other features like driving licence, for example. So we're basically describing the ideal candidate in a person specification. Once we've drawn up those two, we can then draw up a job advert, making sure that we've got key information that persuades people to apply, but also allows them to rule themselves in or out of the application process, so we don't get people applying for jobs that are way out of their league, or that are totally beyond, or totally kind of, if their skill set is way beyond what the job actually requires. So we can do a job advert. We can ask people to reply to the job advert using CVs or application forms. Often application forms are more costly to set up, but it does mean that you get all the information that you require. And often application forms ask a series of questions, so you can do more scenario questions, so you get information that's specific to the job. Once we've received the applications, we then have to go through the process of shortlisting, so measuring the applicants that have been received against the person specification and deciding who we're going to invite for interview. At the interview stage, we can do one-to-one interviews, panel interviews. We might have an assessment day where we invite people for a whole day and ask them to do a wide variety of tasks. So that might include psychometric testing, role-playing, so we can decide who is the best candidate. And we will then offer the best candidate the job. Usually that's offered subject to references, and we can invite previous employers or schools, for example, to give, or educational establishments to give a reference. And then the person who has been successful, the successful candidate, will be issued with a contract. Once people have received a job, they then need to have training, and people who are trying to upskill or change their skill set will also require training. And you need to know about induction training, on and off the job training. So induction training is what people get when they first join in the organisation, and the aim is to get the recruits settled into the organisation as quickly as possible. So we might have things like domestic arrangements, where the lockers are, where the loos are, where you go for lunch, how do you get your uniform, those kind of things. Meet and greet of key personnel, and general company policies like holidays. Perhaps we might have things like sick, what to do if you want to phone in sick, those kind of policies. So we have induction training, and usually whatever job you go for in the organisation, you would get the same induction training. So whether you're a management or whether you're shop floor staff, you would get the same induction training. On the job training is training that's carried out while the individual is actually live, so while they're actually serving customers or doing the job they're paid to do. And usual methods include observation and then some sort of coaching, so if you watch someone else and then they watch you. Off the job training is training that's carried out away from the production or service environment, could be carried out by an external organisation, and then we're thinking about things like training courses. Now, training can be really motivational for staff, and can obviously increase their skill levels and help them to be more effective and efficient in their job, but it also costs a lot of money, and often businesses are quite reluctant to do very much training because of the cost involved. And there's also the fear that once individuals have been trained, they will then go and seek a job elsewhere. So the risk is that you've invested in that individual and then not reaped the benefits. You need to know about these motivation theories. So you need to know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you think back, we've got basic needs, then we have got security needs, social needs, self-esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. And these are all things that can be explained and applied to the workplace. So basic needs will be things like pay, breaks, working environment. Then we've got security needs, which would come from job security, health and safety at work. Social needs, working in a team. Self-esteem needs, recognition, so your manager saying thank you, or award ceremonies. And finally, self-actualisation, which means being the best that you can be, achieving your full potential. And the way Maslow's theory works is that he argued that you move up the hierarchy from the bottom. So you need your basic needs met, then your security needs, then your social, then your self-esteem, then your self-actualisation. And there's a couple of main problems with this theory. It's difficult to identify where someone is in the hierarchy, and it's also a little basic, and it argues people work up from the bottom, when often people are, wouldn't a teacher wouldn't walk out of a lesson if they were hungry, for example, because they would be interested more in doing the best job that they can while they're for the kids and for the school. So they wouldn't walk out just because they were hungry. So we've got some issues there in terms of how the theory works in practice. Very similar to Maslow is Hertzberg's two-factor theory, and he argued that there are hygiene needs and motivating factors. Hygiene things are things that prevent you from being demotivated but don't actually motivate you. So hygiene needs would be things like working conditions, pay, relationship with your boss. So those are things that don't actually motivate you but stop you being demotivated. Then in terms of trying to motivate people, we have motivating factors, and they're things like responsibility, recognition, so very much thinking towards the top half of Maslow's hierarchy. So there are some similarities between the two theories. The sort of polar opposite is Taylor's scientific management theory, and this is a much older theory. And Taylor argued that you need to treat people as though they are machines. He argued that workers are only motivated by money, and so the best way to motivate people is piece rates. And he was an advocate of making jobs really simple and getting people to do really repetitive, simple tasks that required no initiative. So his theory hasn't been adopted by very many organisations, and even at the time there were organisations and factories that didn't agree with his view. McGregor came up with a theory that it depends on the view of the manager as to how workers are likely to be motivated in that organisation. So theory X managers tend to view workers as, lazy, lacking initiative, motivated by money. So the motivation structures in those type of organisations are likely to be more about pay, more about piece rates, perhaps commission, performance-related pay, bonuses. So very much thinking about people as, working for money. Theory Y managers, on the other hand, recognise that people very often work for more than just money, so motivating them needs to be more about recognition and responsibility than it does about pay. So McGregor argues that it depends on the view of the manager as to which motivation theories will be used by the organisation. So common financial motivation strategies: pay, perks like healthcare or company car, benefits, commission, bonus, profit-related pay, and the main issue with these is that they can be expensive. So often businesses will also use non-financial motivation strategies, so recognition, award ceremonies, quality circles, training, improving the working environment. So how can managers get the best from their staff? Well, one option might be delegation. Delegation means passing on the responsibility for a task to another individual. Now, just giving people work that you don't want to do is not likely to be very motivational, but if you delegate, well thought out tasks, delegated with the training necessary and with the authority to actually carry out that task, delegation can be really motivational. Communicating or consulting with staff says that you value their opinion, and so that can be motivation. It's like you kind of recognise the value of their input, so it boosts their self-esteem, and it can be more motivational in that sense. Teamwork helps meet people's social needs. Flexible working could be related to kind of working hours, so allowing people to flexi work, so doing a set number of hours per week rather than dictating when people work during the day. That can be flexible working. That can be help managers to get the best from their staff, because it allows people to fit in their work with their family and home commitments. Job rotation, moving people around to different jobs so they don't get bored and so they become more multi-skilled. Job enlargement is giving people more work to do, although perhaps that might only be considered motivational in a time of redundancy. It makes people feel as though they're needed if they've got more work. And job enrichment is about giving people more responsibility for the work that they actually carry out. So that more responsibility boosts their self-esteem and moves towards self-actualisation. So that can be motivational. So reducing labour costs is often a concern for business, because labour costs tend to be the highest cost within many organisations. So reducing them would be really beneficial to lowering costs overall. So one option for reducing labour costs is to reduce labour turnover. And labour turnover is about how many workers leave as a total of the number of employees working there during that year. And we'll express that as a percentage. So number leaving per year divided by the average number of employees over the year times 100. That labour turnover gives us a measure of what percentage of people are leaving. If people leave, we have several issues. First of all, that we have to recruit and train new staff to replace them, but also, and the costs associated with that, but also there's likely to be a dip in performance while the new employee comes up to speed. So reducing labour turnover can be a real way of reducing labour costs. Flexible working can help reduce labour costs, so doing things like split shifts. So often in restaurants people work split shifts, so they might work, for example, 8 till 1, coming in, doing the prep, doing the lunches, and then go back 8 till 12 on the night to serve when the bar's busy. So that kind of idea means that you don't have people sitting there when you don't need them. Part-time workers, short-term contracts. Another option is 0 hours contracts, which is where you have someone on contract but you don't guarantee them any hours. Not overly popular with employees because they don't know whether they're ever going to get paid, but for the periphery of some workers that might work. And basically you can then just call people in when you need them. Natural wastage is another way of reducing labour costs, and that basically means don't replace people who leave. So if somebody leaves due to retirement, if somebody resigns because they've got another job, you don't replace them, and that allows you to reduce your workforce and so reduce your labour costs. And perhaps the most extreme is looking at redundancy. Many businesses go for voluntary redundancy first because it has much less impact on self-esteem within the organisation and morale. So asking for volunteers and people who are close to retirement, people who were thinking of leaving anyway, often there are people who would put themselves forward for voluntary redundancy. If you're not able to reduce your numbers through voluntary redundancy, you might have to look at compulsory redundancy, making the position no longer exists, putting people out of those jobs. It is very demotivational for workers. Obviously it doesn't make people feel as though they've got much job security, so the impact on morale can be great with redundancy, and often businesses try to avoid redundancy to maintain morale, but also because they don't want to have the costs of replacing workers if times get busy again. So that was the end of the revision screencast on managing people. Good luck with your exam.